AITA for reporting my harassing neighbor and getting him fined. When my wife, Jenna, and I bought our new home, we thought it would be our forever place. It sat on a quiet 2-acre lot, just close enough to the city to have access to everything we needed, but far enough away to feel peaceful. It was the kind of home where you could imagine the seasons changing and time slowing down just enough to savor it all. Spring mornings filled with the scent of freshly cut grass, summer evenings where our daughter could play until dusk, autumn nights by the fire pit, and winter weekends cozying up inside. The first few weeks were blissful. We planted flowers along the walkway, bright bursts of tulips and daffodils that made the front yard feel alive. We put up a small playset for our daughter, Mia, in the back where she could swing and climb safely. And I even built a little patio, carefully choosing stones that matched the earthy tones of the house, where Jenna and I could sit in the evenings with mugs of coffee or glasses of wine, sharing stories from the day. It felt like a fresh start, the kind of fresh start you only get once or twice in a lifetime. Then we met our neighbor, Mr. Perry. At first, he seemed polite, the kind of guy who waved when you drove by. He had a neat, pressed look, always wearing a polo shirt tucked into khakis, a little smile permanently etched on his face. But soon, that smile started to feel like a mask. He began checking in far too often, always with a complaint tucked neatly into the conversation. "Your grass looks a bit long," he'd say, leaning over the fence, his smile polite but sharp. Or, "I hope that playset is safe for children. The city has rules, you know." We tried to shrug it off. Some people just like to meddle. But there was a difference between being neighborly and being obsessive. Within a few months, it became clear that Mr. Perry wasn't interested in friendship. He was obsessed with control. It started with small things. Complaints about our dog barking, which was rare, and about the temporary fence we'd put up during landscaping. Each time, a city inspector came, checked everything, and left, telling us we weren't doing anything wrong. But the seed of unease had been planted. Then the complaints escalated. One by one, they piled up: the size of our patio, the placement of trash cans, even the way Jenna parked her car. At first, it felt like a nuisance, something to ignore. But the constant interruptions wore on us, gnawing at the edges of our peace. Over the next year, Mr. Perry filed more than a dozen reports. The city was kind enough to warn him after a while, and for a short time, things calmed down. But peace is fragile when someone like him is involved. 3 months ago, the complaints began again, more aggressive than ever. First, it was the camper trailer. We didn't even own a camper. Then came the loud parties complaints, which made Jenna and me exchange confused glances. We rarely had guests over, and we certainly didn't drink. The final straw came when he filed a noise complaint while we were away visiting Jenna's parents. Our house had been completely empty. No people, no dogs, nothing. Pure harassment. I snapped. I realized that if he wanted to use the rules as a weapon, I'd better learn to wield them as a shield. I started digging into city bylaws and permits, spending nights hunched over my laptop while Jenna slept beside me. What I found left me stunned. Mr. Perry had over 30 old vehicles scattered across his property, many clearly unregistered and uninsured, blatant violations of city codes. Then there were 3 enormous storage containers behind his garage. They lacked permits and proper foundations, both of which were required by law. The more I investigated, the worse it got. And the biggest shock? Mr. Perry was secretly running a business from his property, renting those old cars out to photographers and film crews as vintage props. No license, no permits, just a quiet, illegal operation tucked behind his neat, orderly facade. I documented everything meticulously, taking photographs, noting addresses, vehicle IDs, permit violations, and submitted it all to the city. The next week, officials arrived to inspect his property. When Mr. Perry received the notice that he had 30 days to remove the vehicles, deal with the storage containers, and either obtain a proper business license or shut everything down, he erupted in fury. He stormed over to our porch, red-faced and trembling, voice shaking with rage. "You'll regret this," he hissed, each word sharp like a knife. Jenna, holding Mia, stood her ground. "Leave before I call the police," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. He backed off but glared at us like he was memorizing our faces, silently vowing revenge. The tension that followed was unbearable. Every morning, I felt eyes on our property. Every shadow in the yard made my heart race. Packages went missing. Once, I noticed tire tracks that didn't belong to us or any of our friends, circling our driveway in the dead of night. I started installing security cameras, motion sensor lights, anything to keep him at bay. Jenna and I barely slept, constantly listening for the sound of a car engine that didn't belong. Then came the anonymous threats. Notes slipped under our door. "You'll pay for this. We're watching. Enjoy your little paradise while it lasts." The police were sympathetic but limited in what they could do. Mr. Perry hadn't physically touched us, but the psychological warfare was taking its toll. Mia began asking why we were always scared, and it broke my heart. We tried to fight back in other ways. I attended city meetings, raised the issue of his illegal operations, and even got neighbors to speak up about the constant noise and construction from his property. The tension in the neighborhood skyrocketed. Mr. Perry started spreading rumors, claiming we were the ones causing trouble, painting us as the problem children of the street. One night, it reached a peak. I was returning from a late grocery run when I saw Mr. Perry in his yard, trying to corner Mia while she played near the fence. I yelled, and he backed away, but the damage was done. Fear had entered our daughter's world. Jenna and I realized we couldn't just survive anymore. We had to end this for good. We went back to the city with everything: documents, photos, video footage, eyewitness accounts. This time, the city took swift action. They issued a cease and desist for his business operations, a warning for the vehicles, and fines for all the code violations. Mr. Perry screamed, raged, and threatened lawsuits, but the law was clear. The showdown finally came on a Friday afternoon. He stormed to our door, veins bulging, eyes wild. "I'll destroy you," he shouted. We had the cameras running and phones ready. "Not today," I said firmly. Jenna held Mia tightly, standing behind me. The police arrived within minutes of our call. Mr. Perry raged until he was escorted away, muttering every threat imaginable. A week after the city's inspection, I thought we might finally breathe a sigh of relief. I imagined Mr. Perry quietly complying with the orders, quietly moving his vehicles, dealing with the storage containers, maybe muttering under his breath, but ultimately letting it go. I was wrong. It started subtly, almost innocuously. One evening, my phone rang. The caller ID read the city office. A polite, slightly flustered voice explained that Mr. Perry had filed an appeal regarding the inspection and, well, he'd turned the tables. He claimed we were now the ones violating city code. At first, I laughed. The absurdity was almost comical. He accused us of building our playset without proper safety measures, insisted the patio had been constructed without a permit, and claimed our dog, Baxter, was dangerously aggressive despite having never bitten anyone in his life. But the city is thorough. They had to investigate every claim. And so, for 2 weeks, inspectors arrived at our home, checking every corner. They measured the playset, examined the patio stones, observed Baxter interacting with Mia, and even had us demonstrate that he responded to commands. While all of it was ultimately nonsense, the disruption was real. We were forced to rearrange schedules, stay home during inspections, and endure the judgmental eyes of strangers who weren't aware of the harassment behind it all. Meanwhile, Mr. Perry's yard, which had been a chaotic spectacle of rusted vehicles and containers, began to empty at an almost unnerving pace. At first, I assumed he had finally decided to comply. But then, through a mutual acquaintance, I discovered the truth. He was secretly moving the vehicles to his cousin's property just outside city limits. It was a temporary loophole, a sly, underhanded way to avoid the city's enforcement while keeping his business alive. Tension in the neighborhood grew. He stared at us from across the street, his eyes cold and calculating, always watching. Packages we received from Amazon were tampered with. Once, a delivery driver called, visibly shaken, reporting that someone had knocked on their window while dropping off a box. At night, headlights would shine across our property, lingering just long enough to make our nerves jangle. Mia started asking questions again, whispering, "Daddy, why does the scary man watch us?" And my stomach sank every time I had to force a smile. And yet, despite all of this, we pressed on. I compiled evidence of his appeal, showing every inconsistency and falsehood. Jenna kept meticulous records of every inspector visit, every city interaction, and even noted Mr. Perry's increasingly hostile behavior toward other neighbors. Yesterday, after 2 weeks of this psychological chess match, the city finally reached a verdict. Every single one of Mr. Perry's claims against us was dismissed. The city sent an official letter confirming that our property was fully compliant, a small victory that felt monumental. But it didn't stop there. Because he had filed false reports, wasting city resources, and forcing unnecessary inspections, he was fined heavily. The news spread quietly but quickly. Some neighbors congratulated us in hushed tones. Others avoided eye contact, wary of Mr. Perry's potential retaliation. Last night, I stepped outside to water the garden under the golden glow of the porch lights, feeling the soil between my fingers, trying to reclaim a sense of normalcy. That's when I saw him, Mr. Perry, standing on what remained of his porch, scowling, jaw tight. His yard was nearly empty, stripped of the clutter and chaos that had defined it for years. The quiet of the night seemed to amplify his fury. He glared at me like a predator whose prey had slipped through its grasp. Then the whisper of movement, a faint sound of a vehicle starting. I froze, heart pounding. Through the darkness, I glimpsed a truck driving slowly down the street, a trailer in tow. I didn't recognize the plate. It wasn't registered to him. him, not legally. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this him moving more vehicles secretly? Or was it something else, something more dangerous? Sleep was impossible. Every creak in the house made me jump. Jenna, sitting beside me on the couch, looked as exhausted and tense as I felt. "He won't stop," she said quietly. "Even if the city has rules now, he won't just let it go." I realized she was right. The war wasn't over. Yes, we'd won legally. Yes, the neighborhood felt lighter without his chaos. But Mr. Perry's obsession, his rage, his sense of entitlement, that couldn't be measured in fines or permits. That was something else entirely, something unpredictable. By midnight, the unease turned to outright dread. From the window, I saw him pacing in his driveway, muttering under his breath. The wind carried the faint sound of scraping metal, maybe a gate, maybe something heavier. My mind spiraled with worst-case scenarios: harassment escalating, property damage, or worse. And then, an eerie calm settled. His movement stopped. The street was quiet again. For a moment, it felt like we had survived, truly survived. But deep down, I knew this peace was fragile. We had won this battle, yes, but Mr. Perry had not been defeated, only checked, cornered, humiliated. And anyone cornered and humiliated, especially someone like him, is dangerous.
When neighbors turn into full-time adversaries, the line between fairness and spite becomes razor-thin. From the very beginning, you approached homeownership with optimism, investing time and effort into creating a sanctuary. Your energy went toward planting, building, nurturing, and making a place for your daughter to thrive. That, in itself, already separates you from Mr. Perry, whose main pastime seems to be complaint collecting. Here's my blunt take: you're not the AITA. Mr. Perry is. Let's dissect why. First, consider motivation. You didn't launch an offensive until repeated harassment pushed you past your breaking point. He, on the other hand, initiated the conflict without provocation, filing bogus complaints, inventing violations, and calling inspectors while you were literally out of town is the behavior of someone addicted to control. That's not vigilance, that's obsession. Second, think about proportionality. Your retaliation wasn't emotional chaos, it was precise. You researched municipal codes, collected indisputable evidence, and reported his illegal operations. That's not vindictive, that's using the very system he weaponized against you to level the playing field. It's like being accused of jaywalking by someone running a chop shop in their garage. He opened Pandora's box, you simply shined a flashlight inside. Third, there's the family factor. Mia's well-being has to be central. Once she began asking why the scary man was always watching, this stopped being neighborly bickering and became a matter of safety. A responsible parent doesn't shrug at intimidation. You did the right thing by documenting, reporting, and protecting your household. Ignoring harassment would have been negligence. Now, here's where I add a slice of humor, because sometimes laughter is the sharpest weapon. Mr. Perry comes across like the self-appointed sheriff of suburbia, except his badge is a stack of fake complaints and his horse is a rusted Buick rotting in the yard. Imagine trying to play the role of neighborhood watchdog while secretly running an unlicensed junkyard. It's almost cartoonish. So, are you the AITA? Absolutely not. But let's consider the flip side, just to test the integrity of the verdict. Could someone argue you crossed into pettiness by combing through his life until you found ammunition? Possibly. But here's the critical distinction: you didn't fabricate. You didn't exaggerate. You simply revealed the truth hiding in plain sight. If integrity means allowing bullies to run unchecked, then integrity is useless. Sometimes the most ethical move is the most confrontational one. My advice? Maintain the high ground. Keep records of every interaction. Install more cameras, upgrade security, and never engage with him emotionally in person. If he mutters threats, document. If he files false claims, counter with evidence. Let the paper trail speak louder than the shouting. Eventually, even the most stubborn city bureaucrats get tired of being dragged into pointless drama. And here's a personal insight: peace doesn't always come from winning the war. Sometimes it comes from knowing you've taken every reasonable step to safeguard your family. Mr. Perry may never stop. He might always simmer with resentment, glare from across the street, or try one more desperate tactic, but his power over you is already broken. He's not the neighborhood overlord anymore. He's just a bitter man drowning in his own fury. Final verdict: you are not the AITA. Mr. Perry is the AITA, and in fact, he's the kind of AITA who proves that sometimes the only way to handle constant harassment is to fight back smarter, not louder. Before we jump into the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know your favorite part in the comments.
Ada for asking my family to respect quiet time.
I live with my parents and my older brother in a small, cozy house near the edge of town. I'm 22, and my brother, Leo, is 27. For the most part, life is ordinary. We eat meals together, share chores, and sometimes watch TV in the living room. But there's one thing that has slowly been building tension in our home, like a low hum that won't go away. Leo and my mother, Diane, have a habit of watching short videos on their phones, and they always play the sound out loud. It doesn't matter if I'm trying to read, if we're all watching a show together, or if I'm having a conversation with my dad. dad. They just play the videos, laughing and commenting on every clip. The sound bounces off the walls, ricocheting through the house, and it makes it impossible to focus. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself it was harmless, just a quirk, something I could learn to live with. But over time, the noise gnawed at me. My patience thinned, and the sense of my own space slipping away became harder to ignore. One evening, I was sitting at the small desk in the living room, my laptop open and an email draft half finished. Leo's laughter erupted from his phone, loud and piercing. I felt my chest tighten, my hands clenching into fists before I even realized it. "Could you guys put on headphones or go somewhere else?" I asked quietly, hoping it wouldn't spark a fight. My voice was calm, though inside I felt every nerve on edge. Diane waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, it's fine, honey. We're just enjoying the videos. Don't be so serious." Leo laughed, leaning back in the couch, scrolling with one hand. "Yeah, it's normal. Everyone does it." I felt a flush of frustration rise to my cheeks. "I know, but not everyone wants to hear it. I'm trying to focus, and it's really distracting." They ignored me. They didn't even glance up. That night, I went to bed feeling unheard, invisible, and exhausted by the small battles I had to fight just to be left alone. The next morning, I woke with a dull ache in my chest. The constant noise had begun to feel like more than a minor irritation. It felt like a violation of my personal space. I decided to try again. "Leo," I said later that day as he laughed over a video about a cooking fail, "could you watch your videos with headphones while in the living room?" He rolled his eyes. "Seriously? We're all family. Why does it bother you so much?" "I'm not trying to ruin your fun," I said, my voice trembling. "I just need some space. I can't concentrate when there's constant noise." He shrugged, eyes glued to the screen, and went back to scrolling. Diane didn't say anything. The tension in the house thickened, settling like a weight in my chest. Every sound, every laugh, every shriek from a video felt amplified, intrusive. Days turned into weeks. I started retreating to my room more often, closing the door and trying to shield myself from the noise. But the living room was right next to my workspace, and even the walls didn't block the sound completely. I could hear them laughing and commenting, even during late nights when I was trying to study or write. I felt trapped. Every time I tried to speak up, I was dismissed. Every request to use headphones or keep the sound low was met with a wave of the hand or a casual, "Don't be so serious." Even my father, who usually stayed neutral, seemed unwilling or too tired to intervene. One night, after another long day of trying to concentrate while the videos blared, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked into the living room, my heart racing, my hands shaking. "Please, just a little consideration. I need quiet sometimes. I'm not asking for much." Leo laughed nervously, glancing at Diane. "Whoa, calm down. It's not that serious." "It is serious to me," I snapped. "Every day, every hour, I can't even think. I feel like I don't exist in this house anymore because you won't stop." The room went silent for a moment. Diane's face tightened. "I can't believe you're getting upset over something so trivial." "It's not trivial," I said, tears forming in my eyes. "I'm struggling here. I feel like I can't breathe in my own home. I'm constantly on edge because you won't even try to respect me." Leo's phone fell to the couch with a thud. Okay, geez. You don't have to yell," he said, voice shaking a little, but defensive. I left the room, my chest burning, and slammed my door behind me. I sat on my bed for a long time, feeling both angry and helpless. I wanted to leave the house, to escape the suffocating noise and the feeling that my family didn't see me. But I didn't have the means yet. The next week was worse. Diane and Leo seemed to push boundaries even more, perhaps unconsciously testing how far they could go before I snapped again. Every morning, I woke with a pounding headache. Every evening, I sat alone in my room, staring at the walls, wishing for silence that never came. I began dreaming of confrontation, of finally standing my ground in a way that couldn't be ignored. But then, I worried about the aftermath. Would it tear the family apart? Would I be labeled the grumpy one, the unreasonable one, the person who couldn't take a joke? And yet, deep down, I knew my feelings were valid. The tension in the house was more than noise. It was disrespect. It was being made invisible in the place I had grown up, in the space that was supposed to feel safe. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I wondered how much longer I could endure it. I wondered how many more nights I would fall asleep feeling unheard. I wondered if I would ever find a way to reclaim my space and my voice without turning the house into a battlefield. I didn't have an answer yet. All I knew was that something had to change. A week after the confrontation in the living room, things began to change, but not immediately in the way I had hoped. I woke up one morning to find my phone buzzing incessantly. It was a string of messages from Diane and Leo. At first, I tensed, bracing myself for anger, passive-aggressive comments, or another lecture about being too serious. But the messages weren't hostile, at least not directly. They had started a group chat, and they wanted me to join. Curious and a little hesitant, I opened the chat. It was filled with links to short videos, memes, and jokes. Leo had sent a few cooking clips. Diane had shared some gardening fails, and there were even funny animal videos sprinkled throughout. At first, I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to get involved in their habit of watching videos all the time. But another part, the part that was tired of feeling invisible, wanted to bridge the gap. I typed a simple hi. Almost immediately, they responded warmly. "Hey, finally joined," Leo wrote, followed by a laughing emoji. Diane added, "We've been waiting for you." For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of connection instead of isolation. Over the next few days, I noticed subtle changes. Instead of blasting videos in the living room, Diane and Leo began sending me clips first through the chat. If I was in my room or working, they would message me quietly instead of turning up the volume. The living room felt calmer, lighter, almost like the house had finally learned to breathe. But the tension wasn't gone. One evening, as I was making dinner, I heard the faint hum of a video starting in the living room. My chest tightened and my hands froze mid-chop. I recognized the sound immediately. It was Leo watching a video out loud again. My first instinct was to shout, to slam something down and demand silence. Instead, I remembered the chat. I pulled out my phone and typed quickly, "Hey, can we keep the living room quiet tonight? I'm trying to cook." There was a pause and then a reply. "Sure, that's fair." Leo's message was simple, but it made my heart lighten slightly. He muted his phone, and for a moment, the kitchen was quiet except for the sizzle of vegetables in the pan. Still, the peace was fragile. Later that week, Diane forgot herself and played a loud video while I was trying to write in the living room. I felt my stomach twist with frustration, but I reminded myself to breathe. I sent her a quick, polite message through the chat. "Mom, could you please watch that with headphones? Thanks." Her reply was instant. "Oh, sorry, I forgot. Won't happen again." It was small, but it felt like progress. Slowly, a rhythm emerged. We began to communicate without yelling, without arguments escalating into long, draining nights. Boundaries started to feel real, like invisible walls of respect that could coexist with laughter and videos. Yet, the tension was far from over. One night, Leo stayed up late, messaging friends in the group chat, and I accidentally glanced at a video he sent to someone else without muting it. The sound filled the living room, and I felt my patience break. I stomped my foot lightly, just to vent, and he noticed. "Are you mad again?" he asked, looking both guilty and defensive. "I'm not mad at you," I said, voice tight. I need some quiet, that's all." He nodded slowly, and for a moment, it seemed he truly understood. But the night ended with an awkward silence, as if both of us were aware that one slip-up could undo the fragile peace we'd built. Over the next week, I noticed other subtle things. Diane would ask before starting a video. Leo would lower the volume automatically if I was nearby, and sometimes they would even wait for me to be done with work before starting anything loud. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and it felt like the first time in months that the house belonged to all of us equally. Then came the small, unspoken tests. One evening, Diane laughed a little too loudly while scrolling through the chat, and Leo teased me jokingly about being too uptight. I felt my chest tighten again. The old familiar tension returned, like a shadow lurking behind the light we had created. I realized that boundaries aren't about punishment, they're about respect. But respect isn't automatic. It's fragile, and it takes constant attention. Every lapse, every forgetfulness could spiral back into old patterns.
Living under the same roof as relatives often magnify small irritations until they feel monumental. What begins as ordinary family noise morphs into something resembling an unwanted soundtrack. In your case, the constant stream of phone clips created an environment where concentration became nearly impossible. That isn't just bothersome, it's eroding your sense of agency inside your own home. Here's my insight: your reaction isn't melodramatic. Humans require pockets of calm to regulate stress, process thoughts, and recharge. When that silence gets consistently interrupted, the body interprets it as an ongoing intrusion. That's why your fists clenched and your chest felt tight. Those weren't overreactions, they were natural signals of overstimulation. Now, let's carve out the "you're not the AITA" angle. You asked politely, multiple times, for simple adjustments. You didn't demand total silence forever, you suggested headphones or lowering the volume. That's entirely reasonable. You live there too. Respecting each other's needs is the bare minimum of coexistence. Their dismissive reactions, brushing you off with "don't be serious," made you feel invisible. Anyone would have cracked under that. Wanting peace in your own environment is not selfish, it's basic self-preservation. That said, there's also a path where you are the AITA. It's worth acknowledging. When frustration finally exploded, your tone escalated into shouting and door slamming. While understandable, those actions can overshadow the legitimacy of your requests. From their perspective, it might have looked like you transformed a minor irritation into a major drama. Families often label the person who raises their voice as the problem, even if the buildup was caused by others ignoring boundaries. In that narrow sense, yes, you momentarily slipped into AITA territory because the delivery overshadowed the message. Here's a suggestion: use structural solutions instead of emotional ones. Soundproofing your room, even with inexpensive foam panels or heavy curtains, might reduce how much you hear. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it gives you a buffer. Another tactic: create quiet hours agreements through the group chat they started. Frame it positively: I'll respect your fun times, you respect my work times. That transforms conflict into collaboration. Now for some humor, because this saga has absurd elements. Picture your mother and brother as a two-person mobile cinema, except there's no popcorn, no ticket counter, and no pause button. They're blasting highlight reels like they're curating the world's worst film festival. And you're in the middle, the unwilling audience member, silently begging for the credits to roll. That's not family bonding, it's audio terrorism disguised as entertainment. Stepping back, I see a broader pattern. This isn't only about noise, it's about acknowledgement. You weren't seeking silence because you despise fun, you were seeking acknowledgement that your presence matters. Being dismissed repeatedly can feel more painful than the sound itself. Families sometimes forget that respect is expressed in small ways, like lowering the volume on a phone. Final judgment: you are not the AITA for wanting respect, peace, and the ability to think clearly inside your home. You are the AITA only in the sense that your emotional eruption gave your family ammunition to portray you as overreacting. But when weighing both sides, the scale tilts heavily in your favor. The root cause wasn't your frustration, it was their disregard. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out AITA for messing with my neighbor who won't stop spreading lies. Click here to watch it now.